Hey everyone, have you ever tried making a power car with the intention of going faster with traction control or TCS turned on, only to end up running slower laps? Maybe the car keeps bogging down out of slow turns, or maybe the very same thing coming out of fast corners because the TCS is kicking in too much. If that's the case, watch this video and find out the 3 biggest tuning mistakes you can make when tuning a car for TCS compared to a car without it. Let's begin by looking at the 3rd biggest mistake players make when tuning cars for TCS, assuming TCS is always faster. Now this is a funny point to bring in because there are plenty of opportunities whereby we see people in different types of cars in all of the classes in online multiplayer, and I can tell that people are using TCS in cars which are not needed, whether that's forward wheel drive cars, all-wheel drive cars, or even rear-wheel drive cars which are actually based for a bit of grip. For example, this Jaguar. I've got this one here, 6.5 handling, 9.0 acceleration. It's a beast of a car, but you don't need TCS for it to get the best out of it. Why is that the case? It's merely because some cars actually depend on that tiny bit of oversteer and slide at the optimum point to actually extract the most amount of speed and momentum through corners. I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive because you always want stability in a car, but at the very limit, which you do see in all forms of motorsport, whether that's Formula 1 or to look at other extreme end of rally cars, there always needs to be some element of slide. The car needs to carry momentum by drifting the tiniest bit in order to carry the most amount of speed. Therefore, not all cars are actually better with TCS, so it's always worth testing the car with and without it by using other people's tunes first, before you try dedicating hours into a car only to find out that it's not actually suitable to use with traction control on. Now we're done with point number 3, let's look over now the 2nd biggest mistake, which is number 2, building for all power but no grip. Now for this part of the video, I'm actually going to use an S-Class beast, and one that has become a staple tune in the game. I know a lot of you guys really enjoy this. It is the 2013 SRT Viper GTS, over 1,000 horsepower and yet still a relatively stable car around most tracks despite a handling rating of only 6.0. This car is definitely designed to run faster with TCS, but you can easily make it slower if your setup fails to balance enough turning on corner entry with stability on corner exit. Now what is it that I mean by this? Well, let's look at the upgrade shop first. Now there are a lot of people who take the assumption that, well, if I just turn TCS on, that means the traction control is going to do all of the job for me, stop the wheels spinning completely, and I'll always have more grip. Which is partially true. The only thing is, let's say that you had a build in a car, and in this example it's not too big of a difference because the Dodge Viper does have very thick rear tyres anyway, but in other instances, think of cars in B class and A class, if you have really skinny tyres on the rear, even if you've got TCS on, that TCS is going to be lighting up left, right and centre. It's going to be happening a lot of the time, and you may notice that out of the turns it is simply bogging you down because the tyres actually do not have adequate grip to push the car forward. So instead they're just slipping away, no traction on the ground, and TCS is trying to compensate. So you have to make sure you build a car with TCS in mind. So typically for me, I'll always try and take the maximum rear tyre width that I can, and then even when it goes to aerodynamics, I always try and include the rear wing. There are some rare exceptions where you are better off without it, and when I say rare exceptions, I mean pretty much any car you're taking around the Le Mans circuit. But other than that, you want to be going with the race rear wing, because as I said, you need adequate amount of weight and grip on them rear tyres, otherwise the TCS is going to be compensating so much that you ultimately lose time whilst you are trying to drive. Now as for the actual tuning aspect of it, that is going to be something we will tuck into in what I believe is the biggest and most common mistake people make with tuning cars for traction control. Number 1, tuning too much oversteer. Now it is easy, very easy in fact, to just think, oh, I have my base tune or whatever tune that I have made up, it's pretty okay, but if I just add TCS, I'm immediately going to be going faster. Well, that's not always the case. What you need to do, especially with the springs, is try and find that balance whereby a car with TCS does have adequate turning. So in this instance with the Dodge Viper, we can see the springs are set up for a bit of oversteer. The front springs are softer, it allows the front of the car to dip in more, which is very helpful when initially turning. However, if we had it to too much of an extent, or even in the rear springs we had these too stiff, what you'll find is, sure, we will have adequate turning on corner entry, but when it comes to the corner exit, like you see on the screen right now, the car is rotating too much whilst applying the acceleration. The TCS is detecting that the car is sliding, therefore traction control turns on and it completely kills your run out of corners. This happens time and time again, and it is a very delicate balance when tuning for TCS. My ultimate recommendation is tune for a slight bit of oversteer, but basically try and make the car as stable as you can with corner exit in mind. After all, it's in the exit of a corner where TCS gives you the biggest amount of gains. So as you can see, even with the setup that I have right here with the Dodge Viper, sure, the springs are actually set up for a bit of oversteer, and the same can be said for the anti-roll bars, but there's not a massive difference here, as you can see. And I've even jacked up the front ride height just to try and help stability and make sure there is a bit more weight on the rear tyres at the second half of every corner. And then when it comes to the aero, I've put on full rear downforce. This isn't always needed. Some cars you can get away with having less of it, especially cars where they are basically too slow to turn in at all. This is where you can take advantage of basically a looser rear end with lower downforce, make the rear end of the car slide out a little bit more on corner entry, but then you still want to try and approach a straight line exit. But anyway, I hope these are subjects that help you guys a little bit. I know it's not so much on the tip side of things, but if you guys have been struggling to build cars with TCS in mind, I'm hoping that pointing out these mistakes is something that will lead you in the right direction. If you are interested in having more videos like this, whether it's for other subjects such as biggest mistakes for forward-wheel drive, all-wheel drive cars, tuning in the rain, or just any other scenarios that come to your head, please comment them down below. Give me your questions, and if I think they are good, I'll try and make a video about it just for you. But until then, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you are subscribed and tune in for our weekly open lobbies every Wednesday evening, which you can see on live stream on this very channel. But until then guys, thanks for watching, take care, and see you on the track.